As somebody who appreciates politics.
This could be loose, by the way.
I understand.
It's like your serious, loose interview.
What about Edwin Edwards?
I think he's probably the best public speaker, one of the most entertaining.
When you say you mean your answers, he says, what about Edwin Edwards? Say, Edwin Edwards is.
Instead of he.
Okay.
Edwin Edwards and font.
All right. I love this. Not only do you get to do the interview, you get coaching. Wrong answer. Okay.
This is the way the real media works.
Oh, I got you. I got you. Okay. Are we ready for me to answer the question again? You don't even have to answer it.
No, not really.
Edwin Edwards is obviously one of the most talented political figures that any state has produced. His ability to take tough questions and turn them into humor, his ability to dream up analogies that no one would think about. The greatest story I remember about Edwards was the Ed Bradley interview on 60 Minutes, when Ed Bradley had spent the whole time trying to nail him and finally got down to the question that, do you cheat on your wife? And he asked the question in such a way where he said, you know, most politicians are like to be photographed kissing babies, but it seems that you like to kiss women. And Edwards looked at the camera and said, well, Ed, if you had the choice between kissing a 6-month-old baby or a 21-year-old girl, who would you kiss? And he's just got an amazing ability that no matter how bad the situation is, or no matter how much somebody thinks he's set up to take the fall, Edwin Edwards can always come back and one-up the questioner or the interviewer. And so he has become just a delight to the voters. I've followed, obviously, the 1987 elections here with Edwards and the rest of the candidates, and it's just a delight to go to the forums. I mean, I look forward to watching the guy. Luckily, my candidate Romer can stay with him, but he's just a delight. He's a phenomenon, I think, to Louisiana. You find as you travel around the country that you don't have the quality or as many good politicians as we have in Louisiana. What worries me is we have such lousy government. You know, there's a quality of candidates is always excellent, but what comes out, it's like making sausage. What goes in looks, well, actually it's the reverse. Sausage, what goes in looks awful, what comes out is palatable. We do it just the reverse. We take what looks pretty good here, and when we finish with it, it doesn't work very well, which is what the '87 election is all about, obviously.
Why is Louisiana politics so colorful or so different?
It's geopolitical. I mean, this is not necessarily a Protestant state. I mean, A.J. Liebling, I think, said it best when he said that this is either the westernmost Arab state or the northernmost banana republic. You've got a very heavy Latin flavor with South Louisiana, where you still have French spoken today. I mean, it's very rare in America where you can go into a state, into a town, and walk down the street and not hear English spoken. I mean, certainly true in Miami, certainly true in Southern California to some extent. But you've got, these are very recent immigrants with the Cubanos and with the Hispanics coming in, although the Hispanics have been in the southwestern part for a long time. There's been a real exodus obviously since World War II, and more importantly since the 70s. But in Louisiana, you've had the French-speaking people have been here for 300 years. So a lot of their culture has just become enmeshed into the general culture, and it is one that is very colorful and obviously has tolerated a fair amount of corruption. It's the old Earl Long story, I never stole more than what I needed.
People appreciate it?
Yeah, and people appreciate it. They figured you weren't greedy. That may be, I've had one pundit here in New Orleans tell me that he thought the day Edwin Edwards got defeated was the day it came out in the trial that they had taken $600,000 cash from the mansion to Las Vegas. That it became apparent that something was going on that was not in their best interest. Plus, somebody else said of that event that the average voter out there just assumed he stole it from government. I mean, $600,000 is such a huge amount of money, and just to take it, you know, the appearance was that it was state money, which was never proved. But I think that that would be hard to prove, but it's an interesting observation that all of a sudden it stopped being fun, that this colorful guy was not acting in their best interest. Peter Hart in his surveys, and Peter is a very...
Let me just getting a little rubby.
Let's do that again, right. Where were we? We were we're
Well,
talking.
let's talk about, how about Edwin Edwards in terms of his place in the long line of crazy Louisiana governors, populous Louisiana
Flamboyant,
governors,
populous,
flamboyant,
whatever.
colorful, however you want to term it. Do you think that he has a fact towards a natural heir to all of this, or where does he fit? And start with Edwin Edwards.
Okay. Edwin Edwards.
Sorry.
That's that music you're catching. It's coming from upstairs. No, I can't control that. How bad is it?
It doesn't sound, I mean, I just hear it.
Yeah.
It's not
It's
Uh,
not very loud.
It's not very
Okay,
loud.
see if you can track it down, and then kill it.
Edwin Edwards earned a place in history when he was elected in the early 70s because he became the first French-speaking governor the state had had probably since the 19th century. I may be wrong on my facts and you need to go research it, but there's no question that just by the simple virtue that Edwin Edwards became the first French-speaking governor in at least 30 years that he earned himself a place in history. He further assured himself notoriety with the fact that he served 2 terms, laid out a term, and then came back and beat an incumbent. Edwards obviously, or the book is out on him though. I think until this election is completed, it will be hard to determine what his place in history is. Were he to be elected in 1987 with the baggage that he carries, then he probably might well in fact be a more important political figure even than the Longs. I don't think that's going to happen, and I think he's going to lose. And if he loses, I'm not sure how he will be viewed. Losing politicians are kind of like bad news. Everybody wants to forget them. So that if Edwards loses this time, I think a lot of the glitz and the glamour and the sexiness that we associate with him will be lost for a while, and it will probably take a few years for people to go back and begin to look at his record, because he's got elected as a populist. Remember, Edwards has always been a populist. He certainly was in the long populist strain. He got elected in '71 by appealing to black voters. He put together French-speaking voters and black voters, 2 groups that were supposedly alienated and not mainstream, because in the early part of the century, and certainly up into the 50s, most of the governors came from north of Alexandria. There were no South Louisiana governors, and certainly no governors from New Orleans. And he broke that mold very definitely by beating Bennett Johnston. So I think the best thing, or the honest answer to the Edwin Edwards, where does he stack up in history, is the jury's out. And I think a lot of what will happen to him is going to be determined on October 24th, 1987. It's conceivable that he couldn't even make a runoff. I doubt that, but it's conceivable.
He, in another speech at the racetrack the other day in New Orleans, he invoked the name of Huey Long.
Well, if you notice, his whole campaign has been one of populism. I'm the little man's big friend, to paraphrase Big Jim Folsom. That's it. I mean, his coalition are labor, blue collar and poorer whites and blacks. And so that I'm surprised he really hasn't done more of it. I would have expected to see him photographed by the statue on the state capitol steps, you know, of him talking about the Huey Long tradition and the fact that he's the only candidate to carry it on. He's come close where he talks about charity hospital, he talks about social programs, talks about keeping universities open, he basically talks about avenues of opportunity. That if you let these reformers in, their reform doesn't include you. It forgets you. It's not for you. I'm surprised that he hasn't done more of it. I'm surprised he didn't do something symbolically with a pilgrimage to Winfield to visit the birthplace. I mean, there was all kind of great press things he could have done and tied himself into the populist tradition that he didn't do. He may...
That's still important to people in this state then?
Not as important as it once was. But remember, he's not trying to get 51%, he's trying to get 20% to make sure he makes a runoff. Politics in Louisiana were from the 30s forward with a long anti-Long politics, and he certainly fits into that long mold of being a populist. But the game has changed, and I don't think that the Long legacy is nearly as strong as it was 20 years ago. Heck, you got Speedy Long in the race, who is a direct descendant, and he's rocking along at a fast 1% in the polls. So that if there was a real residual Long vote, or if there was a vote that you could get as a Long person, you would think Speedy would get it. But by virtue of the name, he gets nothing. Edwards is the populist.
Let me throw this at you. Moon was talking about Edwin this morning, and he said that the man has no real philosophy, that he's not sure what he believes in, even though his rhetoric is populist and some of his programs are populist. When you look at important political figures, they have a program, and they become important enough so their program becomes embedded in politics or redefines politics. Is that the difference between the Longs and Edwin?
It's one way to look at it. There's certainly, with Edwards, everything is pretty much centered on him. The personality is certainly more important than the dogma. I don't think there's any question about that. He enjoys, he's more entertainer than he is theoretician. That's true. I mean, I've heard that before, that there's no real comprehensive Edwards plan or the Edwards philosophy. If you look at the last 4 years, I assume his philosophy is one of capitalism. He's done quite well financially.
What about the style of Louisiana politics in general?
Oh, I think it's changing. I think that...
Can you say the style of Louisiana?
Okay, I'm sorry. The style of Louisiana politics is changing. Television, more than anything else, I think has changed politics in Louisiana. I mean, people watch television. Television is produced nationally. It's not produced just for people in Louisiana. And so that people in Louisiana are influenced by what they see on television. They're influenced by national events. That's not to rule out local events. Obviously, the oil crisis here in Louisiana has been severe. But you just notice it as you travel around the state. Even in North Louisiana, you don't hear nearly as many deep Southern accents. Young kids growing up in South Louisiana don't speak necessarily French nor speak with a French accent. So that there's been a great deal of homogenization of the people, and I think that's true in the politics too.
I got a question to ask you off of that.
The WWL will probably go up with its own truck too. If he's going to be in the runoff, they got to be there.
Will all the other four candidates have their victories? Well, the thing I was going to throw at you is, we spent yesterday over in Houma, every single front line's got, maybe an average of 15 to 20 signs. In New Orleans, a boring election will get a 60% turnout. I mean, Seattle, I think 25, 30% for a mayor's election is, ecstatic.
I hear you. Well, yeah, the interest level is here. Okay, if we're going to argue about interest level, there's no question that in Louisiana, voter turnout is always much higher than the rest of the nation. But the question is, how different is Louisiana? Is Louisiana truly an island amidst 49 other states? There is a perception in Louisiana that we are radically different from the rest of the country, that we do things differently, we eat differently. But I just don't think that the issues that influence people in Louisiana are any different than the issues that influence people in Mississippi or Washington or Maine or Florida. In Louisiana, certainly oil and gas were king, and the decline of the oil and gas industry has affected us severely and caused a tremendous economic downturn. But if you had been up east in Boston, Massachusetts 10 or 15 years ago, they were experiencing the same kind of economic downturn. So that whereas it may be cyclical and go from one region to the next, basically we're all concerned about jobs, education, and the future. We're not running this election on unique issues, whether the crawfish recipe in Breaux Bridge is better than the crawfish recipe in Big Mamou. But if you talk to people in Louisiana, they would have you believe that what goes on here is so much different. It may be a different style, but I think the substance of the politics, the issues are all the same. Now, you can't sell that to Louisiana consultants because they're convinced only they really know. But and as someone who started in Louisiana and have moved out, if you look at opinion polls, what the things that concern people, if you took away the Thibodeaus and the Landrys and substituted Smith and Jones, you'd think you're looking at a poll in Alabama. I just don't think the issues are any different.
But the style is different.
I will grant you the style is radically different. There's no question about it. And the interest level. Politics takes on it's almost a spectator sport. And I guess that's what Edwards capitalized on in a state where politics is a kind of an acceptable form of entertainment. He became the chief actor in the drama, and certainly a well-deserved honor. I mean, nobody's funnier or crisper than he is.
Why do we have the image that we do then?
The image that Louisiana has is fostered, I think, primarily because we are not or because we're not a totally Protestant state. I think that the fact that we were a port, New Orleans was a port, South Louisiana was settled by French-speaking people. There was a different ethic and ethos that developed. And it's historical. I think that our historical roots are much closer to Central America, South America, than they are North America. It's a much more colorful environment. And since I've left Louisiana, I've really pondered the whole thing about how different and unique we are. And I don't really have answers for it. I know that historically you can see patterns in South Louisiana, especially race relations patterns, which are much closer to Brazil than, say, to the race relations patterns of North Louisiana and the rest of the South. So that if you look historically, you can see the relationship between New Orleans and perhaps in Central America and South America. But certainly the influence of South America, Central America, plays a big role in the style.
But it's essentially a difference of style, just not substance.
It may have been in the 19th century, style and substance. I don't think it's true in the late 20th. I wouldn't say that I can tell you that it was always just style, always style. I think there may have been some substantive differences, certainly in the 19th century, but not as we approach the end of the 21st century. I think Louisiana pretty much is in the mainstream. I don't know, and I guess because I've been away, I tend to be a lot less provincial, parochial. There is a certain amount of provincialism and parochialism, but I just see the state moving more and more into the mainstream. I don't feel it as being so totally different than the rest of the world, or the rest of the United States.
Okay. So you don't think that Buddy Roemer, if to be successful, has to become more flamboyant than he is to appeal to Louisiana taste?
No, I think that you can't fool people in this business. Politically, you've got to pretty much be who you are. I mean, there's just, if Buddy tried to be more or less flamboyant, he would be a lot less successful. What you see is what you get. There's a certain honesty in Roemer. The fact that he is a very charismatic guy, the fact that he understands television, he understands message, the fact that he can do 28 and 58-second spots is to his credit, but that's him. And when he speaks, what you see is quite the same as what you see on camera. There's no difference. You would ruin a candidate like them if you tried to make him more or less something this or that. I mean, he just got to be natural. He's just one of these phenomena. He just happens to have all the right assets to make himself a star in this business.
You got rural Louisiana, you have the country stuff, the Huey Long stuff, the Cajun stuff, and then you got New Orleans. And where does New Orleans politics fit into all this?
Well, there are three parts. You're right. You got in Louisiana, you've got North Louisiana, which is Protestant, which is much more akin to East Texas than it is to South Louisiana. The Mississippi Delta, you have an actual Delta region that comes down through the Monroe area, which is black, which is cotton agriculture. Then you've got French-speaking Louisiana, which obviously prospered in the oil during the halcyon days of oil and gas, which has been depressed. And then you've got New Orleans. And New Orleans, remember, was a port. So not only do you have the French influence, but you had Germans, you had Irish, Italians, and then in the turn of the century you even had some Yugoslavs come in. And more recently we've had Vietnamese come in. The New Orleans history is just fascinating. Very few people know that in New Orleans in 1803, when New Orleans was bought by the American government, it was 1/3 white, 1/3 slave, and 1/3 free men of color, which is just fascinating. You've always had you always had in the 19th century a large population in New Orleans that was non-slave. So it truly is one of the most unique cities in America. I would rank it up there with Boston, San Francisco, and New York in terms of real uniqueness, lifestyle, architecture, food, and outlook. I mean, New Orleans is totally different.
What about his politics? One of the candidates that we talked to was heading to New Orleans this week, and one of his rural coordinators says, yeah, he's coming in there and they have a whole bunch of parades in the housing projects, sort of look disgustedly to the side and goes, I guess that's what they do in New Orleans.
Well, remember that the RDO, the regular Democratic organization, predates Tammany Hall in New York, I think. I think it is the oldest political organization. So what you had in New Orleans was always New Orleans even in the 19th century was a relatively urbane place. It's no accident that it was described as the Isle of Orleans. Remember, it was the Louisiana Purchase plus the Isle of Orleans. That's what was bought by the American government. So that even as the city developed, it was always a very urban place. And in the 19th century, I think it was second only to New York or Philadelphia in size. So it's always been an urban enclave in basically the rural South. And then with the in-migration of Eastern Europeans and Southern Europeans, which didn't happen in the rest of the American South, it became a very unique place, just accent-wise. I mean, if you listen to the average Orleanian speak, you're not sure you're not in the American South as I know it. And many Southerners come here. If you read the journals of people who traveled in New Orleans in the 1840s and 50s, especially Southerners, they were just amazed by what they saw. It was just unlike anything else.
What about the politics? I mean, is it also an island of politics in Louisiana throughout history?
See, I don't think that politics in New Orleans is again so much different. I mean, if you say, well, New Orleans politics are unique, heck, so are Chicago's, so are Philadelphia's. I think it's urban politics that perhaps has wrinkles that are unique to New Orleans. But to say that New Orleans politics are totally different from other urban political systems is again a misstatement. I mean, they play hardball politics in Chicago. Look at what's happened just with the transformation of power from white to black. That's been a titanic struggle. In New Orleans, it went rather smoothly compared to what happened in Chicago. I mean, it took Washington 4 years to beat Verdoliak in 2 elections. Philadelphia politics have been rough and tumble. New York politics, they're just indicting half the New York elected officials, it seems.
So the urban politics in New Orleans is just more similar to urban politics?
It's urban politics with a New Orleans accent, but to say that it's any more unique than Chicago or Philadelphia or Boston, my God, politics in Boston are knockdown, drag-out affairs between the Irish and the Italians, and then more recently between the Irish, Italians, blacks, and some of the Portuguese.
But think of it for a second. What's it? Let's say Boston is different than the surrounding areas, New York's different than the surrounding areas, but picture putting New York or a Boston or Chicago in the middle of Louisiana. I mean, is there a greater difference then between the cities?
I think you could bring Richard Daley Jr. to New Orleans, set him down, and the first thing he would do would be go to Ronnie Burke's office. And then from there he would go on, and in 6 months he'd be perfect. Because he could certainly get along with the Irish Pauls, he could certainly get along with the Italians, he certainly understands black politics, and ultimately I think he'd get along fine. I think you could take Kevin White, I use Irishman because I'm Irish, or Flynn. Ed Koch certainly could figure the politics out here. It seems to me he'd go uptown to the Jewish community, build a base financially, and go. I mean, what's the difference? I think those guys function very well. I mean, first of all, Louisianans served in the armed forces. We fought in World War II. We fought in World War I. We get a Social Security card. I just don't believe that we're that radically different. Now, maybe I'm missing something, and maybe since I've left the state, I'm no longer a capable or competent judge. But I gotta believe that Henry Cisneros could come to New Orleans and figure out a way to find 51% of the vote and not be totally lost, be running around saying, my God, this is so unique. I can't figure it out. I got to get the next plane out of here.
Why do we feel that way? What is it?
Why do Louisianians feel different?
Well,
Why do they think?
Why do they hang on to this?
I think if you go and interview kids, students in college, young folks who are involved in politics today, I don't think you'll find themselves saying that. Is what I'm saying. I think maybe we're at a kind of a critical period where we really are changing. There's no question that just simply because of the historical convergences of a lot of different groups, the fact that this was originally a French and Spanish colony before it was part of America, that you've got a different historical pattern. And I think the historical antecedents certainly led to a lot of the differences that have occurred. But I just think that overall those differences are a lot less than perhaps people think they are. We in Louisiana like to tell stories, so it's colorful to make ourselves different. It's colorful to assume that we're different. But I think if you spend as much time as I have working in different states, I mean, I worked at governor's race in in Tennessee, and they actually put the governor in Tennessee in jail. Ray Blanton went to jail. Edwin Edwards never went to jail, but they put Blanton in jail.
Would Blanton then run for a fourth term?
No, but you know, he went to jail, and but Edwards never went to jail. Hell, if Edwards had been convicted, he wouldn't be running for a third term right now. But if you go up, for example, if you want some unique politics, go into the hills or the mountains of East Tennessee, which is truly, because it's Civil War politics. I interviewed a guy there who was a Democratic.
But he couldn't lose an election unless a couple of things happened. Can you tell us that story?
I believe Edwin Edwards was quoted as saying Dave Treen could only beat him if he were found in bed with a live man or a dead boy, was it?
Okay.
I don't know. I really, you know, to be honest with you,
You remember Townsend Park, that whole stuff?
well, I mean, you have to go get the testimony. I remember it. I mean, the question was, he kept evading in the grand jury, and finally, when the question about did he take the $10,000, Edwards said yes, and they said, why didn't you tell us? He said, because you never asked me the right question. And he's reputed to be one of the best courtroom lawyers. Folks who saw him practice law 25 or 30 years ago in Crowley said he was just devastatingly good. He started winning judgments for poor blacks and uneducated whites and beating the hell out of all the big lawyers. And that's how he gained his reputation. But I'm sure Mr. Edwards can tell you exactly how it came in and would be glad to tell you all the good stories. I mean, anybody that can get on television when they, on local television, state television, in a debate, and when they ask him if he had any any skeletons in his closet that would hurt, who said, quote, all my sins are public, I'm sorry I can't commit any more for you. I mean, it's not a man who's going to be inhibited about talking about himself.
Let me bring it back to the campaign. Your candidate looks as if he's pulling ahead in the polls.
Mm-hmm.
Sketch for me what will happen if Edwin Edwards and Buddy Romer are in a runoff. What's it going to look like?
I think it'll probably be some of the most entertaining debates.
Say it.
I'm sorry. A debate between Edwin Edwards and Buddy Romer, I think, would probably be a classic. It'd be a battle of titans, the day the earth trembled. They're both excellent debaters. They're both excellent politicians. They're both very confident and competent. And I would look forward to that. I really can't wait. I think we ought to sell tickets as a way to retire whatever state debt we have. And I think we ought to tape it and send it to political science departments all over the country so that they can see what real politics are. Because these guys are classic. You don't get that kind of quality too often running against each other. And if there is anything to the legacy of Louisiana politics, it is colorful figures. And these are certainly two very, very colorful men.
Hold on a second. I'll turn the camera off. Buddy Romer talks a lot about not liking Louisiana politics and how he's going to change the way politics are done in this state. And if he gets elected, maybe he can do that at the gubernatorial level. But aren't Louisiana politics and all that that implies, doesn't it go all the way down to the lowest police juror in the most obscure parish? I mean, isn't this whole system sort of shot through with a you scratch my back, I scratch your back kind of attitude? And isn't that going to be very hard to do anything about?
No, I don't think so, because I honestly believe that, I think the phrase, I hate Louisiana politics, I love Louisiana, is a way to sum up the whole issue of corruption. And certainly with the fact that Edwards has been to trial twice, you've had national media down here, the implication has been that Louisiana was a politically corrupt place, that everybody from the dog catcher to the chief officer was all on the take, that if you wanted something done, you leave $50 in the fuse box, or you pay off the policeman, or you pay this or that. I mean, that's the image that we've gotten, and I think what Buddy was saying there, and rightfully so, is that the old way of doing things, the old image that we have, has to change. That's not an indictment of every elected official. I don't think that you probably have much more corruption here. In other words, if we looked at every elected official in Louisiana compared to every elected official in Mississippi, my God, in Mississippi, this year they've put over 100 county supervisors in jail. So that there's no more or less corruption, I really don't think, in Louisiana. And I don't think that corruption per se is endemic. But when you have a governor like Edwards, who's had the indictments, who's basically lived on that edge between legal and illegal, who's lived on that edge between going to jail and not going to jail. It's created the illusion, and I think what Buddy did was, in a phrase, capture what we need to change, and that is the image. So that I don't think that you can assume that we're all again any more or less corrupt than any other place.
Has Edwards said that the standards don't apply for him, essentially? Has he lived above the standards?
He has never said that, but he's certainly a man who's very confident, who likes to live on that edge. He's a man who's and the pressure doesn't seem to bother him much, and he's certainly a man who makes his own rules. Most people are amazed at his candor. You know, one of my favorite quotes is in the Gary Hart-Donna Rice affair. They asked Edwin Edwards if he thought the Eastern press had been too critical of Gary Hart, and he said, "I don't know. I haven't seen a picture of the girl yet." So that, you know, there's always his ability to tell you what he thinks. He never backs away from answering the questions, and he always tells you what he thinks, whether it's, quote, politically saleable or not. Just fascinating guy. It'll be ashamed to see him go from the scene, but go he will, I think.